This is Allison's editor. Stick around for the end of the episode. There's an additional question that you don't want to miss.
My name is Allison Field, and I want to welcome you to Create Your Blank, the channel where we share stories of amazing people who have actually created their blank. We share how they got started, what inspired them, and the journey of creating where they are today. I am so excited to have today with me in the studio, Jeremy McKane, and for him to be able to share his story with you. Welcome, Jeremy.
Hey, thanks for having me. This is exciting.
I'm excited to have you. So please share, let's just start off with what you do today. Because I know you do a lot of different things, but what you do today and what you would say about it.
Yeah, thanks for asking it that way. The core of what we do is really try to put nature on the balance sheet, right? And we say that nature shows up every single day for work. She provides us all the things that we need to live. And if it was an employee, that employee would want to get paid. And, we think whatever we can take from nature is free, but that's not really the case. And so we've built an artificial intelligence company that analyzes billions and billions of measurements from the ocean every single day to interpret what that actually means. It's the equivalent of saying, wouldn't it be cool if you knew that, on just this little tippy point of your finger, you had some cancer and you could do something with it before it took over the rest of your body? Imagine if we could do that on a planetary level. And that's really the problem that we set out. We like to tell everybody we're like a Fitbit for the ocean. And that's what we do.
Okay, that's fascinating. So tell me more about AI. I love when was AI like on the scene?
Well, I guess it depends on who you talk to. For me, I guess my first foray into it was I had a really dear friend of mine who had a traumatic brain injury several years ago, probably close to like 9 or 10 years ago. I didn't know anything about traumatic brain injuries, and I was learning from her through her. There were times where she would become extremely depressed. And then I started learning that this is also a thing that was happening with NFL players. Anyway, so long story short, I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if we could somehow capture the way that we write emails to people, and look at I guess a scientific process called stylometry, right, where we look at the way that certain words are coming together when we construct sentences, or the way that we punctuate or capitalize, or in my case, overcapitalize or over punctuate. All of these things point to me as the author. And I thought, well, wouldn't it be cool if a person had to be in a dark room because their brain was healing to say, hey, Google, send an email to Jeremy, just let him know I can't make it for lunch today. And I would actually get a response in my inbox the way that she would want to talk to me. So that was like my first kind of foray into this. And it was a way to say, could we somehow bridge that time where the body needed to heal? Could we use machines to be able to help fill that gap of time so that person didn't feel disconnected from the world and feel depressed?
Nice.
My initial work on this was somewhat of a failure, to be quite honest with you. We were using this project through Google called TensorFlow. Essentially, it's like, when this happened, then do this. It was very cumbersome, and it was something that I kind of more or less gave up on. And it wasn't really until I saw the very first open AI stack that I kind of reinitiated that project to see if I could actually create something that had her likeness. And then we were sitting together and I said, hey, you're never going to believe this, but I would ask it a question and it would come back with an answer. And I would ask her the question and she would tell me the answer and they would match, which was really cool.
Wow,
that
cool.
was my introduction anyway to AI. I've always been tangentially connected to it, but it wasn't really my specialty until that incident kind of kicked me into this. And I thought, well, what could I do for my friend?
Cool. Now tell me, that's fascinating that you use AI in your business to study the oceans, and tell me more about how that works. That's
the real challenge with the ocean is time and space, and there's a lot of different variables. And by the time that you collect a bunch of data and it's sit on a hard drive for so long that data becomes antiquated and it might not even be useful in many cases. So our question was, how do we interpret the data, right? There's a lot of conversations early on about, we should have a platform to collect data around the oceans. And while that sounds idealistic, you can end up with a data junkyard pretty quickly. And so we thought, well, what if we could analyze this data and interpret what it actually means so that an average person that was not a marine scientist could say, well, I know what's happening. I know the reason why this coral bleaching event is happening. It's because of serratia marcescens and human fecal coliform, because a lot of times we make assumptions and sometimes they can be false. And with enormous amounts of data and using artificial intelligence to actually correlate different data sets against two different types. What we call that a one class support vector machine is an algorithm that we would use. And we look for those anomalies. And we want to focus on those anomalies before they become the next major catastrophe.
Such as?
Well, it could be anything, right? It could be a bleaching event. It could be something called whitepox that occurs on Elkhorn coral. Imagine if you had the ability to scan 4 different types of pathogens. Turns out in the Keys, the very thing that's killing Elkhorn coral in the Keys is human waste, human fecal matter that and sometimes you can't see, but the pathogens, Serratia marcescens, that exists in our gut ends up in the ocean, creates whitepox, and ultimately becomes the very thing that kills that Elkhorn coral.
And that is scary.
It's scary. You know what's more scary? It's like not going to the doctor. A lot of guys have this problem. They don't want to go to the doctor because they're afraid somebody's going to say something. But that's the time you should go there. Get an assessment. My mom would always tell me once I turned 40, get a colonoscopy. Yeah. And then you figure out like, oh, well, I got nothing to worry about. I got my colonoscopy. I'm safe, But what would happen if I didn't? And all of a sudden they came back and said, hey, well, you're 60 years old now. By the way, you've had colon cancer for the last few years, obviously. So it's that early detection that makes things preventable in health and in our bodies. It's also the case in marine science.
Cool. Okay, so your company does the AI with the ocean. And so what's your goal of your company, overarching goal?
Yeah, well, I would say it would be to really put nature on the balance sheet. I mean, it's one thing to assess the value of what's happening scientifically. It's another thing to really interpret what the value of that, what we call an ecosystem service. It's not the actual underlying asset. So it wouldn't be your seagrass or mangroves, but it's what the mangroves do for us as humans, right? Because if they were to die, then we would have to build synthetic systems that would replace what they were doing. It's kind of like when there were no bees in China, people were manually pollinating, right? How much does that cost? And is it cheaper for nature to do it? We think so. And so the idea is that if we can take this data, we can interpret what that ecosystem service value is over a period of time. Then what we can do is we can start to open and unlock potential investments that will protect nature and also build capacity in these regions.
Nice. That's a huge, huge vision and goal, right? It feels so expansive, but like daunting.
It would be daunting if it was just me, but I've often said there is no Superman of the ocean, but there is a Justice League, and I'm just part of the Justice League. We've got a lot of different companies. We've got a lot of different NGOs and nonprofits that we work with. We're working with sovereign nations. Everybody plays a beautiful role, and it ends up looking like this Venn diagram. And it's only when we collaborate some of these beautiful things happen. I like to think of it, Dr. Carl Sagan once famously wrote the poem, A Pale Blue Dot. And that was a photograph of Earth as the Voyager spacecraft left the solar system. And he said, on this dot, everything you have ever known, everything that has ever existed, every king, every queen, charlatan, they all existed on this spot. But many of them, he goes on to say, that would fight and spill blood to have a momentary ownership of the fraction of the pale blue dot. And I think this is why we are in the situation that we are now. We are fighting for the fraction amongst the tapestry of the cosmos. This is the first time that I feel like if we really got ourselves together and looked at this from a standpoint of a global ocean, as a one ocean, we have an opportunity to collaborate and really thrive. Because if this planet doesn't work for one group, it's not going to work for any of us. And so it's really important for us to come together.
Yeah, great. And you've done some fun collaborations, haven't you?
Well, I guess it depends on who is asking, but sometimes, to be fair, are fun. Other times they can be very challenging, but which ones are you referring to?
Richard.
Right.
Yeah, he does great work with the oceans, and I know that you guys have connected, and he's doing some great work, and y'all are doing great work together, yes?
Yeah, a couple years ago, I had this crazy idea about what would it be like if we could just get people to talk to people that they wouldn't normally talk to. So I had just mentioned to a few friends of mine that wouldn't it be great if I could bring artists, philanthropists, business leaders, scientists, politicians, put them in the same room. And I loosely joked, said we should do it on Necker Island. It seems like a lot of really good collaborations. Virgin Galactic literally was a bunch of people that were sitting in the hammocks looking up at the stars. And do you think we'll get to go to space? And it just so happened that the right people were there to make that a possibility. Virgin Galactic, that is. Well, I was jokingly mentioning it to a few friends, and I got introduced to this amazing friend of mine, Susie Mine, and she had been doing events on Necker, and she was like, well, what would you do? And I told her, and she's like, well, you should come to Necker and you should meet Richard and tell him about this idea. So I sat down with Richard and Susie, and we talked about the idea of creating a gathering where we brought those kinds of folks. And we said, instead of just talking about things, what if we had an ocean action summit? We call it Ultramarine. And what if we focused on tangible things that can be done in 12-month rolling cycles? Hold everybody accountable to these things.
Nice.
And Richard looked at me and said, I think it's a brilliant idea. We should do it here on Necker. And so we have been. Richard's always been such a really great supporter. Sometimes I wonder if he thinks I'm crazy with all my crazy ideas. He once told me that, because I did tell him, I remember he asked me one time, we had our first event, we had all these people from all walks of life. And he's like, I've had a chance to meet everybody here. He goes, how did you get them all here? He goes, they're so different. And I was like, well, honestly, Richard, I'm just a weirdo. I'm crazy. These people are crazy and they're weirdos to believe in me. So that's why they're all here. And he's like, well, it's the crazy ones that change the world. And I was like, well, all right, maybe I'm onto something here. Richard's just been always a really good supporter of things. And I think that, I think he's a really great guy, and I don't think that you could ask for a more humble human being. I mean, he's done some really amazing things in the world, and he's not a person to really talk about himself, and he's kind of a guy that I want to aspire to be. Of course, here I am on a podcast talking about myself, but I really love what he's done and the way that he approaches things.
Yeah. Yeah, that's so cool. I remember when you planted the seed for that years and years ago, and I remember it happening, and I'm like, holy crap, he manifested that.
Well, sometimes you just have to figure out, like, hey, I want to do this. What are the options? And I think if you say something and you have good people around you, they're likely going to support and try to find a way to help you.
Yes. So in that vein, what do you think is your superpower and what it is that you do?
I don't know. I mean, it's funny. I've been asked that question before. I've always loved people. In fact, when I was a kid, I used to get in trouble by my mom because I would talk to people in the grocery store. I was probably like 4 or 5 years old, and I would see somebody had Pop-Tarts and they had a flavor that I haven't tried yet. So I'm talking to this random person about Pop-Tarts, and my mom was like, will you shut up? And people all the time will ask me, say, well, I know this human being, or I know this person. Would you want to meet them? And my answer is always the same. I'm always happy to meet a new person, and I love to listen to what they do. I've always said I might not do business with you, but I promise you someone I know will, because I really like the idea of putting people together. And I think that's kind of what led up to Ultramarine is really your people come to Ultramarine, and when I know you're coming, I think very quickly within the network who does what and who could benefit from each other from a potential collaboration. It doesn't always end up the way that I think it will, and which is a good thing because I'd be a horrible programmer of these things, but things have a way of really working out. So I feel like maybe my superpower is community. I don't know. I think somebody else would have to answer that question.
I think my opinion is connection. I mean, I think you're brilliant at connecting people, and that's how we met. So for those of you who don't know, I met Jeremy more than 20 years ago when I was executive director for Allie's House, and we were having our art auction, and you guys showed up and had Frankie Garcia,
That's
Frankie
right.
and had an idea for us for a thematic event every year. And it was just delightful. I mean, it rolled and it happened, and you made connections for us. And I remember that so fondly. And I remember that the key to that event being successful were the connections. So,
well, I've always believed that if you're in a room full of people and you're making connections for other people, then that probably means someone's making a connection for you. Not that you expect it, but it's a lot easier to help other people than it is to take.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. So what do you think is the most challenging thing about your blank, what you're doing now?
Well, I mean, I think, what we're focusing on is we're focusing on nature as an asset class. And it's a very foreign idea to some, but when you start really thinking about it, you use nature every single day, right? This podcast is being sponsored by the ocean, right? Because every second breath comes from the ocean, and so really getting people to, sometimes I have people that say, well, we put a price on nature. And it's like, well, we already have. As my dear friend, Dr. Carlos Duarte and Dr. Ralph Shami, we've put a price on nature and it's $0. That's not fair, right? Would you have your employees of your company do all the work that they do and stand by you and be loyal and pay them nothing? Of course not.
Right.
So I think people will say, oh, it's a nascent market. And it's like, okay, well, then let's shut it off. Let's see how long you survive. But it's hard to get people to realize what is happening here in this space is really important, but we are making strides. I mean, we're also big financial institutions like BlackRock and Goldman Sachs have now entered into what they call the nature market. We're just really early into this, but I think that there are some dangers. There are some things that we need to look out for. I think for our focus, we always want to make sure that the groups that we work with, the indigenous communities, the countries in which we work with, we're not doing it to them. We're doing it with them. We're building capacity within those regions that will ultimately build up their own resiliency.
Yeah. And that takes something for sure. Yeah. So what is your favorite thing about what you do?
Well, I mean, people. I mean, I love the people I get to meet, and I love the stories they get to tell me. I've been to some really amazing places around the world where I have aspects of their culture that I would have probably not seen otherwise. And I think, Mark Twain once famously said that the antidote to prejudice was to travel, because how could you possibly judge your fellow man from one corner of the planet? I think by traveling and really listening to these stories of people, it builds an element of empathy that really words can't describe. And I think that ties directly into the work that we focus on here at OCN.
Yeah, that's beautiful. That's beautiful. So I read, actually, I saw it, that you spoke at the House of Lords, the UK Parliament.
I did. Yeah, that was a little nerve-wracking, to say the least, because I'm like, why do you want me to talk there? What am I going to talk about? And then there was the other element of, I got to wear a suit? Okay. I don't want to wear a suit, but it's respectful, obviously. Yeah. So, no, it was really nice. They were nice enough to have me there, and we were talking about artificial intelligence and really understanding how can we look at nature and the ocean, and is it conducive to an increase for biodiversity? And my talk was really about how to make nature investable, and that was the impetus of the talk. We had a really great audience, and I got to have a tour of Parliament. At first, I thought they were going to have me in that chamber where they all yell at each other and argue.
Right.
And I was like, please don't put me there. And they laughed. They're like, no, you're not going into the chamber. You're going into one of the side rooms. I was like, okay, good. But yeah, I mean, it was a little nerve wracking, but everybody was so lovely to have me. And that was Harry Wright from Bright Tide and Sangeetha, who just always so special to always think of me.
So nice. So nice. What an honor, right?
It really is. It really is. Words can't describe.
And a couple other things I want to mention. You attended the World Economic Forum as well. How did that go?
I did. This is my second time going to the WEF. It's a very interesting place. If you've never been, it is like I don't know. I once described it as being in the middle of a spy movie, right? Because here are all these different characters, and they're all doing different things and saying different things. I ran into President Modi from India when I was there. It was just in the street, and I just had a quick hello and a chat, and then I ran into Prime Minister Tony Blair when I was at this place called Goals House, which is just Goals House, by the way. It's run by this amazing human beings, Arlo Brady and Chris Gorell Barnes, Ocean 14 Capital, and Freud's. They are just absolute masters of connection. If you think I'm good at this, I'm nothing compared to those guys. They are just absolute masters. Love them to death. But I happen to be walking out, and then here comes the security detail, and it was Tony Blair. And I was like, oh, I just said hello to him really quickly. And I was like, hey, I said, Mr. Blair, I said, I'm Jeremy McKane, like he's going to know who I am. And he was so nice. He was like, nice to meet you. And I said, well, I know I'm an American. You were always my favorite prime. And I said, is that safe to say? Am I supposed to say that? And he's like, I think that's safe to say. And then we just had a nice little brief exchange. But I think Davos is that kind of place. It's a place where you might have this conversation. There are some negatives that I could think about, but I like to focus on the positive, because if I'm able to really quickly see someone like that and say, look, I know that you could do a little lift and make an enormous amount of change if you knew some of the things that maybe my folks knew, that would take a fraction of the time to do versus us and our grassroots movements.
Right.
That's the place to do it, right? But you don't go to Davos with half-baked ideas, right? Because you're going to waste your money and your time and all those kinds of things. But I'm a fan of it. I think that it's great. I think it's done in the right way, in the right circles. You can be highly productive and good for the work that, at least that we do.
Yeah. Yeah, very cool. It was exciting to see that you had done that as well. So what would you recommend to somebody who is starting out, trying to figure out what they want to do with their life, and they have a lot of interests and they're not quite sure the route to take. What would your advice be to them?
Well, I mean, it's like years and years ago, and if he's watching this, he'll probably be like, I probably did say that. But years ago, when they had the Dallas TV show reboot, the producer was Ken Topolsky, who also did The Wonder Years, and The Wonder Years was one of my favorite shows as a kid.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting across the table, and I say, I've always wanted to be able to write like that. And he leans forward across the table. He goes, "You want to know the secret?" I said, "Yes." And here I am waiting for this like magical potion. He goes, "Start." Okay.
Heard of that.
Yeah. I mean, so like if you have an idea and you say, "Hey, I'm at work. I don't like what I'm doing. I don't know what I'm going to take a walk, go in the woods." Just really think about a problem that exists in the world and how there might not be a solution for it. But don't create a solution and look for a problem. That's the one thing that you should not start, because there's a lot of people that do this. Well, I think what the world would need is this. And then now you're hunting for this problem that doesn't exist. Look at the problems that exist. And sometimes they're not sexy ideas, but they need, can you make a solution into a business? Of course you can. You just have to really open your eyes. And sometimes we get tunnel vision because we're always used to looking at things a certain way. Right. But look at it like a child, like you're a brand new child entering into the world. What do you see? And that's how I do it. I mean, I'm 47 years old, but I'm probably like the biggest kid that still like to skateboard and all these other kinds of things. And so that keeps me fresh, sometimes hurt. It keeps looking at things in a very different perspective.
You still skateboard?
I do. I actually hurt myself back in August, but I still have my skateboards in the back of my car. I really messed up my foot, but it's back in working order.
I would imagine that riding on a skateboard or any such object that would sort of ignite new pathways, new neural pathways and it probably inspires you with these amazing creative ideas that then you can run with, right?
Well, I think as we get older, we kind of get jaded, right? We don't do that anymore. We don't make silly faces when we take photos anymore. We don't take photos anymore. Like, try to remember what it was like to be a kid, right? Be goofy, be silly. Don't worry anything else. Just do it as if you were 10 years old again. My wife was here right now. She's like, "Oh yeah, he's absolutely a 12-year-old.
Love that. Well, I've seen the pictures with your girls. Your girls are probably now all grown up.
They're getting there. That's the part that is hard, because I like to think of myself as a cool dad, and now they're old enough to not think that I'm so cool. But I would like to remind them that I would come home and we would have daddy-daughter dance time. I would wear a tutu. I would put on music. I would dance with them. I don't know how many dads do that, by the way. In fact, when they were babies, I used to have a turntable and I would DJ for them in the crib. But somehow at 15 and 11, I'm not as cool as I used to be. So there you go.
Well, the pictures will tell, right? The pictures will tell, and the memories and the Facebook memories that pop up. Because I remember those sweet moments that you had with your girls in their early years.
I love being a dad. It's the best thing in the world.
And I used to think, Jeremy is such a great dad. And a girl dad, of course.
A girl dad. It's funny. I didn't know what to do with girls. I remember when we were at the OB, we were like, well, we're not going to be, we didn't want to be one of those couples who's like, well, don't tell us. We're just going to be surprised. We were just like, no, we want to know, And I remember him saying, and I remember in the back of my head thinking, what am I going to do if he says it's a girl? Because me and my brother, we didn't have any girls in our house. I didn't know what that, I have no point of reference, And he's like, well, congratulations, you're having a baby girl. And I remember the first thought in my head was, what the hell am I supposed to do with that? I know nothing about girls, and now I've got 2 of them, 3 of them, really, my wife included. I am outnumbered. Actually, I do have a little dog, and he's the only little bit of testosterone that runs around here besides me. But I wouldn't change it for the world. I look at raising these girls and being with them, and I think to myself how amazing it is that I have that opportunity. In fact, I have a nephew. He's younger than and I've had him over. We've watched him, and he's just a kid. He's just like I was when I was a kid. I remember being like him, right? Because I was a boy, and you forget when you have. I think was it Nate Bargatze, comedian. If you watch a little boy versus a little girl. Like babysit, that's not a fair trade-off, Like you watch my girls and they'll look around your house and say, hey, do you mind if I help you clean up, or you want me to help you fold laundry or whatever? They'll do whatever. They'll hang out with you. They'll talk to you about what happened at school or some new design they want to do. No, having a little boy is literally like bringing a cow into your house. It's like things are breaking and things are being thrown everywhere. I'm like, that is not a fair trade. I think that for one babysitting of a little boy is like 4 little girls.
Right. See?
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But I remember, and I think to myself, my poor mom, she had 2, bless her heart, as we say here in Texas.
I love it. So what is one question that I haven't asked that you wished all interviewers would ask you?
No one's ever asked me that before, so maybe it's that question. Yeah, I don't know. I think I don't know. I think for if I were to think about the questions that are never asked, it would probably, why does nature matter? Right. And I think when we look at it from that context, because it's like, yeah, we all appreciate nature. We all like to go on vacation, but we don't really answer the question, why does it matter? Right. And I think we get, I know we're in a very tumultuous time. We have conversations about climate and we don't have conversations about climate. We have a conversation about pollution and no pollution. But nature has always, because we are nature, we are part of nature. Right. And so, and I think it matters because there's a word that I think of when I think of why does nature matter, and it's symbiosis. Mm-hmm. We have to be completely in sync with nature in order to thrive. And our financial systems are broken in a way. And really what we're aiming to do is unite them, right? I'm not going to go to everybody and say, hey, I want you to be a conservationist. There's a people. Years ago, I was lucky enough to meet Dr. Jane Goodall in Paris, and was it COP 21 or something like that. I think COP 21. And she had said something along the lines of, it was impossible for someone who is impoverished to think about the protection of the planet because they are stuck in survival mode, trying to take care of their children, put food on the table. Solve that problem and people will become conservationists. And so I really felt from the very beginning of this, like, to do something on this level with such amazing companies and nonprofits around the world, we needed to find a way to meet people where they were at. And it was like, what if we found a way to increase your GDP, increase jobs, build capacity? Oh, by the way, we protected nature. That's how we did this. So it wasn't just a win for all those things, but then nature itself, the whales and turtles and everything is like, thank you. Right? Because now we're looking at a value system that's very different than the way we look at it now. So that's the question. Why does nature matter? I think that's the thing that we should all be asking ourselves. And because I think each of us would have a different response.
Yeah. Yeah. Great question. Great. Why does it matter? Why does nature matter? Well, it's everything, right?
Yeah. That's all we have.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you, Jeremy. It has been a delight and great to see you again and to hear about all the great things that you're doing in the world. And I admire you so much for all of that. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thanks for having me. And like I said, I would love to tell you that I had this idea and it's all me, but it's not. I'm literally the village idiot, and I have some really amazing, smart people around me, and that's what makes it possible.
Well, you are the magical connector, that's for sure.
Well,
so thank you again. It was wonderful having you and learning more about your latest endeavors. So if people want to reach out to you, how do they connect with you?
Yeah, you can go to our website. It's the Ocean Currency Network, but it's OCN.
Okay. And that'll be in the show notes too. And if you enjoyed this segment, feel free to add comments, as we'd love to hear from you. And if you'd like to receive future notifications of episodes, please hit that subscribe button. Thank you so much for tuning in, and we hope you have a beautiful day. Thanks, Jeremy.
Thank you for having me.
Hey, Jeremy, I thought of the best question and didn't ask it, so I'm going to ask it here. What can we as citizens of the world do to support, the underlying efforts in cleaning up the oceans? And that answer would be really great to know. And it's a call to action, I think, for people. So let me know your thoughts. And thank you again. It was super fun to see you and hear what you're up to. Talk to you soon. Thank you.
We are partnering with Nautilus Magazine, UNESCO, Live Nation, and Prada. And in June of this year, we will actually have a live concert at the United Nations Oceans Conference 3 We will have it at the Alliance Stadium, which is 44,000 people. And we've partnered up with an amazing group called Earth Percent, which is founded by Brian Eno, the amazing and awesome composer. And the idea behind Sounds Right campaign is that it's for the very first time nature has been made an artist. This means that when you play nature, which you can actually stream her on Spotify now, just search for nature as an artist on Spotify. When you play nature, she gets the royalties for that play, and subsequently she can that funds her own conservation. So what this is meaning is that sometimes we feel helpless, we don't know what to do, but at the very least we could stream a song, and we hope that becomes the gateway drug to doing more for the planet. But if you can't do anything else, listen to nature on Spotify.